this is a very emotional decision. This is their home where their family lives, that they spent a lot of money on, that's completely torn upside down. And now you're pulling it apart and you're finding a lot of issues that weren't done right. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Midweek Modern Craftsman. This week's podcast and blog post is on how to address changes with your clients and with work and projects that you are undertaking. I've had my fair share of that on this project that I'm currently on. But before we get into that, I wanted to I guess it was a few months ago, back in February, a guy named Steven, and I hacked his last name up, and I'm going to do that again now. It's Ratpojanakel, Steven Ratpojanakel. I'm sorry, Steven. He sent me coffee, and as a thank you for the podcast and some coffee suggestions, he sent me a gift card for a coffee shop that he uses. But he heard about my project that we're going to be building for ourselves, and he sent me a book suggestion. It's called The Timeless Way of Building, and apparently it was a book that one of his architecture professors in college used for their text. And he says it's an old book that focused on principles of site-specific layout, creating flows and moments in your home that create joy, and human-scale design, which is very important. People don't understand how much human-scale design has a role and plays a critical aspect of architecture, and that dates back to the columns and the order of the columns and architecture from hundreds of years ago. So I'm going to check that book out. Thank you, Stephen. I apologize for jacking your name up. Back to our regularly scheduled program. How are you guys doing? Having a good week? Kids, everyone should be off for summer at this point. I know that the East Coast is one of the last schools to remain in session. The kids got out last week. So hopefully you are having fun with your kids. They're not driving you up a wall yet. I haven't been home, but they have been driving my wife up a wall. And they're not in camp yet. They start camp after 4th of July. So she's been home with them. I know that they've been a lot for her. My mom actually just took them for an overnight to get them off of her hands for a bit while I've been working. So hopefully you guys are enjoying your summer. I can't believe that 4th of July is this week, next week. I don't know where the hell the time goes and how it's 4th of July. I guess it was just Memorial Day. It's still just, they didn't seem to be this close together when we were kids, but I guess they are. But I can't believe it's 4th of July already. That blows my mind. It's a weird spot for 4th of July this year, landing midweek. I know that my wife and the kids are heading away. I'm not sure what I'm doing yet based on the job that I'm on and a lot of the issues we've been running into, because I have some time to make up on schedule. So I'm not quite sure what we're doing. I might just head away for the weekend before July 4th and then come home. So we'll see. To be determined. But hopefully everyone's going to be doing something fun for the holiday. Enjoy yourself. Have a little bit of downtime. Enjoy summer. On to this podcast. So I started a job a few weeks ago at this point, and it was a kitchen remodel. It's what my last podcast and blog post was on. And before I forget, sorry, I'm all over the place today. It's late. I usually don't record this late, and we already recorded our other Modern Craftsman, so my brain is spinning. Usually I do this earlier in the day, but I had other stuff to do. Before I forget, hop onto the website, www.moderncraftsman.co, and check out the written blog posts and let me know what you think. For every recorded podcast that I do, there is a written blog post on our website that supplements that. So hop on the website, take a look, share it, spread the word. As always, if you have suggestions for podcast blog posts, just reach out to me, Tyler at trghomeconcepts.com. Let me know. If I haven't responded to your emails, I'm sorry. I'm not the most diligent with responding to emails, but I more than likely took note of your suggestion and put it in my phone. I can only do so many of these podcasts every week. So eventually I will get to your suggestion, unless it's an absolutely horrible idea, and then I won't. But so far, all the ideas have been great, and I believe will serve every one of our listeners and provide a lot of value for you guys. So I will eventually get to them. It just may not be this week, it may not be next week. But I appreciate it. And please do not stop reaching out to me. Again, Tyler at trghomeconcepts.com. Okay. So I started this project, and it was supposed to be a kitchen remodel and a light first floor remodel. And the customers had a leak in what they, when I looked at the job, said was the bathroom. And then they told me that they would probably get it taken care of before we started the job, because we weren't going to start the job for around 6 months. So right before we started the job, a week or so before I was to start, the customer let me know, hey, we never got that leak sorted out. Can you look at that while you're here? So that was in a room right off of the kitchen, which I was supposed to get the floors refinished in there and light painting touch up to the baseboards, door casings, um, for that area, but that was not part of this remodel. So I knew at that point the ceiling had a hole in it that I was going to have to cut that open and see what was going on. So I'm sure if you guys follow me on Instagram, you've seen what we uncovered, but essentially I opened up that ceiling. The leak is coming from a door upstairs, that there's a fiberglass deck. So they added a roof deck. They put a door directly on the deck. So they flashed their fiberglass up. Um, it doesn't appear to be enough. That's not where the leak is coming from, but I think that maybe they ran their fiberglass up onto the sheathing 6 inches or so. I know my roofer likes to go up 12. If there's a snow load up there, it starts melting from up against the house. Um, if you're running it up 6 inches, you might as well run it up 12. But I think maybe they ran it up 6, and then the door is sitting on the deck. So there's no way to flash underneath of that door or tie that door into the decking. Um, Combine that with a hip roof that's dumping water right down into the corner of where that door sits. And now every time that it rains, there's rain going underneath of that door and down into this area that's right off the kitchen. So when I opened that up and I found the leak, I was really confused as to what was going on with the framing there. And it turns out that this roof deck and enclosing this area on the outside that at some point was an outdoor, I would assume maybe a screen porch. It has like a small brick foundation wall. They made it living space, and with the back of the house there was a cantilever. So when they added the roof deck and added the framing, they didn't tie their new ceiling joist or floor joist for the deck into the out the old exterior wall, which they opened up with a bunch of beams. They did the same thing in the kitchen. They essentially took the old cantilever and what would be a rim joist hanging off of that cantilever and just tied joists into that with joist hangers. So that um, transition between the new floor joist and the rim joist and the cantilever, there's nothing structural underneath that. They have some joist hangers that don't have adequate nails. They're 2x6s, so they're undersized as well. Um, and that cantilever was never designed to have another 8 feet of roof deck and a second floor in one part above it. So we got the engineer out to assess that. We're going to have to put a steel beam in, um, open up some more walls, and then the kitchen ceiling, the electrical scope changed. So I realized that there was something going on funky with the kitchen ceiling. So I spoke to the customers, and I decided the best thing to do was pull that down. And when we pull that down, we exposed the same situation in the kitchen. Not as bad because it's a hip roof, which is somewhat self-supporting, but there is a bump out with second floor living above that. On top of the cantilever, there is a second floor. So same thing. They now tied their what would be collar ties in to this. So you just can't do that. You have to take it to the beam or the old outside of the house. They did open up the old exterior of the house to cut through with the big steel beam. They could have easily gone in and just sat it on top of that steel beam, but they didn't. So we had to rip that ceiling down, reframe that ceiling. And then when I went to go move some windows, I realized that we were pulling one window, reusing it, and then closing up another window. So I pulled the one window to reuse it. I closed that up, and then I went to go install, cut the new window, and I realized the window that I pulled out, because it's going from a bigger window to a smaller window, all the flashing was done wrong, and it's leaking badly. And it probably leaked from day one when they did the addition. And not only is the sheathing rotted out, but the framing, the whole structure on this corner of the house is completely rotting out. Um, so at this point now, I have to rip all the windows off the back of this addition, replace all the sheathing, obviously pull all the stucco, pull all the sheathing, um, try and salvage those windows, clean those windows up. I had to rip all the gutters off, all the fascia had to come off. I had to rip the post off the second floor deck, on and on and on and on. The scope just continues to grow, and it's frustrating because I feel badly for the customers, but also I'm just continuing to take steps backwards, right? And it's not even a money thing, but I'm supposed to be making progress. I was supposed to have my electrician and my plumber there this week, and I'm still demoing stuff. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on, why this is so wrong. And at the end of the day, somebody didn't pull permits and did all this work. And one trade chased another trade, chased another trade. So it started with framing and it ended with finishes, crown molding, the roof, but everything's wrong. And everyone chased everyone and essentially came into a shit show and just perpetuated that shit show. So what now that I briefed you on that, which was probably that was not brief or terse or concise at all, fairly long-winded as a matter of fact. I want to talk to you guys about how I deal with the customers, because everyone who's seen this engages me and says, "Man, that has to be a tough conversation." And the fact of the matter is, it's an extremely difficult conversation. And when I first ran into the ceiling framing, full disclosure, I called up Nick and was like, "Dude, what do I do here?" Because like my scope just crept a lot. And this was before I knew everything. And I don't know who I address this first, how far I should go, because I opened up a ceiling that's not in my scope. Should I open the rest of that ceiling up? So I just talked to Nick, felt him out, and excuse me, talked to Nick, and what we determined was like, yeah, these are really difficult conversations, but you have to figure out what's going on first. So you have to take the time to really inventory, digest, and then the issue, everything that you found, and your limit how far your demolition is going, right? So I don't want to just go in and tear this whole ceiling out and say it has to go. I want to inspect and inventory and really assess what's going on there with the exposure and my amount of work being limited at this point, because I haven't approached the customers about this. So I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know how they're going to react. I don't want to just go do all of this work if they don't have the budget for it, they had no idea this was going on, if it's not something they want to do. I would not proceed with this job if it's not something they want to do, because it's a structural deficiency and I can't do my job the right way without fixing this. But I need to have that conversation with them first. So we essentially decided that I can't move forward without figuring out a solution. So based on my limited knowledge of what's going on right now and my assessment of the situation, my assessment of the job, and what I could see, what are my next few steps? So for me, it was, hey, this is what's going on here. I have to get an engineer here. Before I get the engineer here, there's something that I believe is funny going on in the kitchen ceiling too, because at this point I had to cut a little hole in there to see what was the leak was going on two sides of this wall, and I wanted to see how bad it was. When I opened up the little piece of drywall, I saw that the ceiling was furred down. A couple other things indicated this, like that the drywall was put on after the walls were up, which gave me an idea that somebody pulled the ceiling down, flattened it, and then put the walls up afterwards, because typically drywall is going on the ceiling before the walls. So I had some indications that there was something funny going on, but I was not supposed to demo this area. I was not supposed to touch that ceiling. Um, so I determined that I wanted to pull that down. Were the customers going to go for that? I don't know. If it were my house, I would have. I spoke to my roofer. He came out. The guys demoing, I ran it by them just to get a feel for what everyone was thinking, their take on it. Again, I spoke with Nick, and my next move was, okay, this is what I think should be the next step. I need to get an engineer here to fix this beam. Here are my ideas before speaking with the engineer as to what I think we could do. Here are a couple suggestions. Here's the most expensive. Here's the least expensive, least invasive way. But at least I'm coming to these customers with ideas. Are they 100% applicable? Do I have an idea of cost? Do I know how long it's going to take? Can this actually be done um, with the engineer? I'm not sure, but at least I'm beginning to think about this and the potential impact of scope, schedule, and budget. The next call for me is to the designer. Hey, this is what I'm running into. Do you want to be a part of this conversation with the customer? Um, and the answer was no. You can take this up with the customer, but you have to communicate with us as far as how this impacts the overall schedule of the job, cabinet delivery, appliance delivery, everything else. So I told them I would let them know and keep them in the loop as soon as I knew it. So I knew that I had to get an engineer in for this, and then I knew that I wanted to pull the ceiling. So I told the customers, I asked them if they could meet me at the job before I left. They couldn't, so we decided to meet first thing in the morning. I made sure that nobody was coming to the job first thing in the morning so I could have an uninterrupted half hour with the customers. I just told everyone to come at 8:30. Um, so I walked them through and I showed them what was going on. I showed them where the issue was with the door upstairs. I spoke to the roofer. We discussed getting a shorter door, creating a curb, pulling off part of the roof and reflashing it, making sure there was step flashing, fixing the fiberglass, putting a new curb in, and installing the shorter door so that we had a curb and prevent the water intrusion at that point. So we had a fix for that. I didn't have pricing for that, but I was able to quickly obtain pricing from the roofer and from my door supplier. Got the door ordered, got that approved from them with a quick conversation. Um, and I told them what was going on downstairs now with the framing that I uncovered from the leak. And hey, I have to get my engineer here. I got a hold of him. I asked him what it's going to cost for him to come out, what he thinks it's going to cost for an engineering fee. He gave me all those ballparks. I discussed them with the customer. Um, and then I told them what I wanted to do, what I would feel more comfortable doing. And it was tearing down that ceiling to expose any issues. Again, you're putting a brand new kitchen in here. It's a drywall ceiling. It shouldn't be that big of a headache. So they said, yeah, like definitely let's pull it down. We're here at this point. We can redo all the electrical, get the lights exactly where we want them, which I thought that we should have done in the first place, but that was just not part of the scope for this job, not a scope that I developed. So that was the plan, pull down the ceiling. So I pull down the ceiling after they leave and immediately find that they also tied this ceiling framing into a cantilever, which wasn't right. So at this point, I reached back out to the engineer. Hey, I want you to look at this while you're here. In the meantime, I know this has to be fixed. The kitchen is the most pressing on the schedule as far as scope goes because I have plumber, electrician, insulators, everyone coming in here. Can you at least, when you're looking at this next week, can you at least size me the beams that I need for the kitchen? So if special order, I can get them ordered. And if not, I can at least get the framing done in the kitchen. So I scheduled to meet with him, and I told the customers essentially I was a bit of a standstill. There were little things that I could do, but I was at a bit of a standstill until I figured this out. So I met with the engineer, um, and we determined a decent path to move forward. So I order everything I need for that for the ceiling. Part of the scope from the inside was taking a window out and replacing it. I told you that when I did that, I realized the flashing was wrong. So essentially now off the back of the house, I was supposed to get rid of one window and swap out another window for a smaller window. So a little bit of framing. And I pulled the one window and realized at this point that essentially every window on the back of the house is going to be rotted because they flashed them improperly. All the sheathing is rotted on this edition, and that all the sheathings the windows are gonna have to come off, the sheathing's gonna have to come off. Obviously, the stucco is gonna have to come off. At this point, I had to rip the gutters off. I had to rip the posts off the porch upstairs. All the fascia had to come off because as I chased this problem, one thing led to another, which is what happened when everyone put it together. They screwed them with the framing, then the window guys screwed the stucco guys screwed the trim carbon. It just one after another. It snowballed and snowballed. So before getting a hold of the customers, I wanted to limit my impact on this project without going too far, but I also wanted to have a general idea of what was going on. So I removed as much as I could to see what was going on and determine a plan, but I didn't reach out to anyone yet because I wanted to move a little bit forward in the project, and get a bigger overall picture of what was going on before I went to the customer again. Because at this point, I tell them that this has to happen, and then as I rip stuff off, or I rip the fascia off, I realize the gutters have to go off. It's 8 different conversations that are all related to the same thing, where I think it behooves me to have an overall comprehensive idea and understanding of what has to be done, even as far as the railings go, right? To have the conversation before I know the railings have to come off. They have to come off no matter what. There's no way of fixing this without doing that. So to email them when the railings have to come off, and then the gutters, and then the part under the roof that they mounted the rail, it's just a lot of information, and 8 emails about single solitary items that have to be removed, or line items that are changing produces far more anxiety than just emailing them or texting them or calling them and saying, "Hey, ran into some stuff on the job. Can we meet tomorrow?" So I continue to, I changed my schedule around. I had my buddy Tom come out to look at what landscaping could be removed to rip all this stuff off. I just keep moving forward in this project without necessarily touching base with the customer. Again, while protecting myself, protecting my subs. I'm not doing work that they didn't approve, that doesn't have to be done. This all has to be done at this point. Whether they not finish the interior, the exterior is an absolute mess, and it had to come off anyway. So I'm limiting my scope and protecting myself, but at the same time taking the customer's best interest in mind, my best interest, my sub's best interest. So I get my buddy Tom to come look at the landscaping, what has to get transplanted in order to salvage that and not get damaged during the renovation. I get the roofer back out at this point because I'm like, yo, there's issues with the roof. If we touch the roof, what do we own? Well, say we fix the roof and then the windows above the roof are flashed the same way as what was below. And it's not stucco, it's hardy up there, but if it's leaking behind the windows and then getting into the wall and then going into the ceiling above the kitchen, even if you fix the roof, you now own that because they're going to say it's the roof still leaking. And you're going to have to get everyone out there and pay out of pocket and prove to them that it's not the roof leaking. And by chance, it could be leaking from some point of the roof because it's getting in behind the windows and then coming through where the roof is because water's not supposed to be back there in the first place. So he's basically like, listen, if we touch it, we own it. We have to do everything. He's like, we touch one piece of flashing on that roof, and now we own every leak that comes through that roof. So the conversation is, what are our options now? Do we not touch anything? Do we just fix the fascia, try and deal with the issues from once the water hits the shingles, down towards the drip edge onto the outside of the wall? Is that all we own at this point? Do we own the windows that are placed on top of this hip roof, basically sitting on top of the asphalt shingles that you cannot flash? So, like, the right way to do it is to pull the windows, reframe the header, and move the windows up. And this isn't me just wanting to do more work, but it's like, say we rip the roof off and there's no way to flash the windows, so we do it the best we can, and then it leaks below the windows. Who's going to own that? Who's going to be liable? Who's going to be at fault? It's going to be me, and it's going to be my roofer. So I had a 30-minute conversation with my roofer again for the second time out on the same job that he has not gotten paid for, that I haven't gotten paid for this consultation at this point, about what are our options moving forward. And the purpose of this is to be able to have these customers come to the job and not only provide them with all the information they need to understand what the issue is, but also what information and what impacts need to be considered when making a decision to move forward. So we now have two options that I developed with the roofer. One, don't touch the roof, fix everything else, leave all their caulked stuff, and then fix what we have opened up. And our limit of disturbance is minor. Um, Keeping it to what we know is an issue and not fixing stuff that may or may not be leaking right now. Really tough to tell, has been caulked over the years, but again, no way to fix without fully redoing. The other option is, do you want to rip the whole back of the house off from the roof up, make sure all the windows are flashed correctly, the roof above it is flashed correctly, any roof that ties into it, all the stucco, all of that stuff's done correctly. That's a huge expense. That's something that I am 100% sure these customers didn't account for. But if you want to do it, and I own all of this, that's the way that it has to be done right. Is that something that you want to do now? Or is that something that you want to put this all together, get your kitchen done, and then 2 years from now, rip the roof apart and take the back of the house off and everything else? I don't know their agenda. I don't know their program. I don't know their financial situation as to what is going to impact this call and what they do, but I want to provide them with all the information I have and give them options. For me to just call them and tell them, hey, your roof's leaking. I don't know. Do you want to replace it or not? Like, it's not doing me any justice. It's not doing them any justice. And me just saying, yeah, replace the roof, and then not considering everything else that bears on that is also, it's throwing me and my roofer under the bus. So this is another critical aspect of having these conversations with customers, where they're difficult. It's a hard conversation to have, but it's a much easier conversation to have when you obtain the knowledge of how to not only knowledge of what's going on with the project, what are the issues, what went wrong, what is wrong, but then how to fix it, and then providing them multiple options. You don't even need to know pricing at this point, right? Because like I told my roofer, I don't want you to sit down and do a takeoff for ripping off the whole back of this house. I want you to give me order of $5,000 to $10,000 what you think it's going to be if we have to rip from the second floor off, redo all the hardy, move the windows up, all of that stuff. Just give me an idea as to what that's going to cost, and then get me an exact on the what our original scope was plus the other couple of changes. But you don't even need that. You can have an order of magnitude. Hey, if we just fix this, it's going to be a little bit more than what we budgeted. If we do the whole back, it could be 10 times more. As long as they understand the order of magnitude as to how much more work this is, maybe they want to go the better option, the more comprehensive option, and you end up having to get that pricing down before they okay it. But taking a chance on them saying, no, we're not going to do that, there's no way, you just saved yourself and the roofer all the work of doing that in the first place. So come to them with as much knowledge and as much information as possible, but don't bend yourself over backwards doing this when you don't have an idea of as to what direction they want to go at this point. So the next move for me is to call the customers out, and for the third time on this job, walk them through what we're finding. walk them through the concerns, walk them through the issues, walk them through the potential fixes, how this is going to impact the overall timeline of the job because they moved out and they have kids in school. And it's summertime, but it's going to go past summertime at this point. So how does that impact them? How does this impact their financial situation? How does this impact the overall scope of the project? How much more of their house we're taking over? How does it impact my subs, my timeline? Can we move this project forward in other areas, even if we're getting hung up with this? So there's a lot of things to consider, especially when this isn't the original scope of the job. But going to a customer, having a full understanding of what's going on and how to fix it gives you confidence to have that conversation. You're not you're not calling them up and saying, "Hey, this is going to be a lot more money, but we don't know how much that's going to be, and I don't really know how we're going to fix it." No, you took the time and you stepped back and you got your subs and you called your design professionals and you assessed and you inventoried and you gauged what was going on and then how to fix it and what you need to do to move forward. You may not have everything figured out, you may not have budget figured out, but you have enough information to get a direction from your customers to involve them in making this decision, which at the end of the day, it's their house, it's their finances. They should be a part of. You have to protect yourself and your reputation, legally protect yourself, and protect yourself from an insurance standpoint, your exposure, your risk, everything else. But at the end of the day, if your customers don't have money to pay for this, what are you going to do? Like, you can hang a tarp over the back of their house, but you can't put work in place if they don't have the money to pay for this. Or is it finishing up the outside and then holding off on finishing the inside until you have money? But you need to figure that stuff out before moving forward. And you need to be confident in your finding and confident in your solutions. And I think that these conversations are a lot easier when you do that. You also have to realize while having these conversations, this is an emotional decision for these customers. It's not just, there's financial implications here, but this is a very emotional decision. This is their home where their family lives, that they spent a lot of money on, that's completely torn upside down. And now you're pulling it apart and you're finding a lot of issues that weren't done right. So now it's like, hey, we bought this house and there's issues here. What other issues are we going to uncover? Why do we spend this? There's a lot going on here. So you have to be firm in your propositions and you have to be firm in what you are able to live with and what you're able to not live with, as far as your business goes and what you'll stand behind. But you have to be soft in this situation. You have to be compassionate for these people because this was supposed to be a really fun project for them. There's a lot of anxiety with it, but at the end of the day, like, yeah, we saved up all this money and we're going to do this renovation. We're going to have a new kitchen, but you're not going to have a new kitchen when your house leaks like a sieve and it's rotting from the outside in. So that's a tough pill to swallow, especially when you're already spending a lot of money on the rest of the job. And now it's like, hey, let's spend a lot more money on stuff that we're never going to see and stuff that if it was done right in the first place, you shouldn't have to be spending money on a house that's 40 years old and the addition's probably only 20 years old. So you have to be firm, but you have to be compassionate. You have to be soft and you have to understand where these people are coming from. This is not a conversation to be had over the phone, not a conversation to be had via text message, not a conversation to be had via email. You can tell them that you want to meet because you ran into some issues. Don't worry about it till we get here. You don't want them for the next 12, 16 hours mulling this over. What is it? What is it? What is it? If they ask, you can be like, hey, we found some points of intrusion with leaking. I'm not sure what route you want to go to move forward, but I'd like to discuss that, what I think the best options are and what our options are in general, and have that conversation in person with them so that you can visually show them what's going on, explain to them why it's wrong, explain to them why it can't remain, and then provide them with the options to move forward and which path they want to take. Give them an opportunity to ask you questions, to push back if they feel that you're doing unnecessary work. Give them the stage to be the customer to ensure that you're doing your job correctly. You know that you're doing your job correctly, but they don't. Maybe this is the first time you work for them. So give them an opportunity to gain and establish and reaffirm that trust in you as their contractor, that you withhold their best interests in mind. So those are my suggestions for these really difficult conversations. Again, especially this one, the blog post is a fair amount different. I somewhat flew off the cuff with the podcast recording and just let my ideas roam. But hop online and read the written blog post. I think that there's going to be a lot of useful information in there. But the biggest takeaway from this is that coming to a customer or anyone with a problem, if I had somebody who worked for me, coming to me with a problem it doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't provide much value. I can go and tell everyone we have a problem, we have a problem, we have a problem, but what is that doing? It's not helping anyone. Really inventory and determine what the problem is and how extensive that problem is, and then figure out what options you have to remediate that. Again, with this job, I did that. I had the engineer come out, I had the roofer come out, and then I uncovered more, and then it got worse, and I had the roofer come back out. And the point of this is to make sure that I know what's going on, that he's protected, I'm protected, and my customers understand what's going on, that they have uh, all the information that they need to make the best decision that they can moving forward. And again, those decisions are based on my recommendations and what I'm willing to live with uh, as far as my name being on this project. So be compassionate, be empathetic, but be firm in your suggestions and make sure that you do this in person. This is not a phone call. This isn't a text message. You have to understand that this is these people's home. This is their investment. This is where their kids live, and this is a big deal to them. So it's something that needs to be taken very seriously, and you don't want any gray area when it comes to emotions online or in an email or a text. You want to be able to look them in the eyes and explain to them what's going on and read them and see how they react and see what their decision is, and it'll be telling for all sides of this. So I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Again, I'm a little bit all over the place. I'm recording this later than normal. I'm a little bit tired. I've been working a lot more than I have recently just to try and keep this project on. Well, it's not on schedule anymore, but to try and keep it moving forward, because I feel as though I have taken 2 steps backwards for every 1 step I've taken forward. And I hope that this provides you guys with some information as to how I approach this project. And this has been a lot of changes, and it's been a lot of bad news. And I hate to be the one bearing bad news on people over and over again. But at the end of the day, I need to be the professional. I need to give them options. It's no different than a doctor, right? When somebody has something wrong, don't just tell them, hey, you have cancer. That's it. No, hey, you have this type of cancer. We found that out by doing this, and this test. Here are your treatment options based on your physical um, status, your health at this point, your age, what other people have done. That give them all the information that they need to make a decision to move forward. You're guiding them in their decision, just like a doctor or a professional guides you based on the knowledge, the expertise, and the experience that they have. But the doctor, again, wouldn't call you and leave that on your voicemail. He wouldn't text you that information. They'd have you come into the office and have that conversation. And I don't feel that what we do and that this situation is that different. Now, I'm not saying by any means that having cancer is the same as having a project go upside down. So don't say that. And we've dealt with our fair share of people with cancer in this family and everything else. So I'm well aware of the impact of what cancer can have on a family. So I'm not saying that, but it's something to approach delicately, but firmly, and understand all of the information that you have and provide that to your customer or your client or your patient, whoever that may be. So hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. It's storming here. I hope the thunder wasn't too loud and that this recording worked out, even though I blanked out for a little bit. But I'll catch you guys next week. As always, leave a review, shoot me an email with suggestions, share these, any sort of positive feedback, constructive criticism. It's all welcome. Tyler at trghomeconcepts.com. Thanks, guys. I'll catch you next week.